Today, I have this Athearn Bluebox Southern Pacific GP9, and this model is seized and not running. Today, I'm going to attempt to revive this thing and get it running once more. First up, let's test this unit out. Last I recall, this model was seized, but I'll give it some power anyway, and we'll see what it does. And I don't know how well you can hear that, but the model's very clearly humming. Let me change directions. And same thing the other way. So very clearly, something in there is seized up. Before we dive into repairing this model, let me just show you around it really quickly. For the most part, everything is here, but there are some defects and whatnot. As you can see, we have all the handrails on this side, on the front of the model, and on this side of the model. However, we don't have any on the rear of the model, which isn't a huge issue. I don't really have any replacements, so I think I'll just end up leaving it that way. On the front, these side bits seem to be way out of whack. I may need to glue those in with some canopy glue later on. This whole front piece is also held in, well, I think I held the front end with a little bit of canopy glue. I'm not sure if it held up or not. I also did the same with all the stanchions on the sides over here. But we're going to be taking these off anyway to clean the shell because as you can see, there's quite a bit of dirt up there. It's not the worst I've ever seen, but it can use a good cleaning for sure. And the last thing to note is that these little brackets on the trucks right here are broken. This seems to be kind of common on Bluebox models. I got the thing that way, and since two of the four truck covers have them completely missing, we got the one up here and the one back here, I'm just going to remove the one on this side and on that side just to make it a little more uniform, and I'd also rather have them not be there than have them be there but broken. Now, with that out of the way, we can take the shell off of this model and get to work. On these Athearn Bluebox Jeeps, it's really easy for the most part. At least on the GP9s, there's just two clips on each side, and you can kind of just pry it off by hand like so. Now, before we dive into the chassis, I'm just going to take a really quick break, remove the horns, the handrails, and whatnot from the shell, and give it a good scrub with some soap and water, and then we'll come back and start dealing with the issue that we have within the chassis. Alright, now that the shell has been taken off and dealt with, it's time to figure out what exactly is causing this model to seize up. And what I really want to do is narrow it down. I want to know if it's the motor or if it's something to do with the trucks. First, I just kind of want to see if I can turn the flywheels over by hand and feel if it's stiff or anything like that. So it is definitely stiff. I would definitely think something's locked up, but I don't think it's the motor. But really the way to tell is to remove the worm gear covers and see how the motor spins without either of the trucks attached. First up, I'm going to remove the trickier one at the front of the model. This worm gear actually feels pretty locked up. You see these bearings? I'm trying to twist this and they are barely moving whatsoever. That one truck alone could be our issue. This truck also feels very stiff. It should be moving much freer than that. So I'll see now if we can turn the motor over by hand. It is a little bit freer, but still no. So I'll take off this rear truck. Once again, the exact same issue with the worm gear. And this truck is completely locked up. Now, let's see once those are gone if the motor will actually spin freely. And it will. I can also tell that these motor mounts are very weak and worn out. I've got a solution to temporarily hold them in place, which we'll get to a little bit later, but I'm not going to be replacing them because I don't really have any replacements. Just for fun, I want to hook my test leads right up to the model itself and see with the trucks removed if it'll actually turn over. All right, I'll give it some power. And aside from me removing this plate and this little piece here getting in the way, that seemed to run a lot smoother. So it's definitely those trucks that are our issue. Additionally, as we're working on this thing, I plan on getting rid of this little plate up here. Yes, I know this is original, but I've seen on some of these GP9s, it is a very close fit between the rear of the model, the flywheel, and the actual plate up here. They can make contact in some cases, and it can cause a little bit of binding and some bad noises and whatnot, and in some cases even electrical issues. So I'm just going to get rid of this later on and replace it with a wire. Now that the plate is out of our way and I've removed these little connectors, I do just want to see how the motor itself runs without any attachments. So I'll give it a little bit of power once again. And aside from those loose motor mounts, it seems to run pretty smoothly. So yeah, I'm 100% sure that our issue resides in the trucks and the worm gears. The chassis of the locomotive is now well out of the way, and it's time to get to work on cleaning up these trucks. I don't know what we're going to find in here, but hopefully we can get these cleaned out pretty well and get them rolling smoothly once again. And in case anyone is curious, I'm just going to be using some rubbing alcohol to clean up all the components of the trucks, the worm gears, the worm gear covers, all that. For the time being, I've set the other truck off to the side, and we're going to start with this one. To get this thing apart, first, as you saw, you need to remove this little worm gear cover. Those will try and fly off everywhere. The other thing you need to do is we have this little clip right up at the top of the model right here. That needs to get removed. Then we need to remove the big plate that holds the wheels in place, which is held on each side by 2 clips. Then you can spread the truck apart just a little bit and pull out the wheel sets. And then everything is just able to come out just like so. And now with all that done, it's time to actually go in, use the rubbing alcohol, and get all these components as clean as possible. Regarding the worm gears, I just made a very slight change of plans. I have a bunch of spare Bluebox worm gears and whatnot laying around, and the ones that I was trying to work on, I just couldn't get to spin right, at least the first one I tried, and I figured that I should probably just replace them with good new parts and mess with the old ones later. So I've just pulled out a couple of brand new ones, and these seem to be spinning much freer. So I don't really want to worry about the worm gears anymore. All the plastic components and plastic bearings of the trucks themselves should be much easier to clean out and get running smoothly in theory, so I'm going to mess more with the gearing of the trucks and leave the worm gears for a future date. So all the components for the first truck have been cleaned up. Just for fun, I kind of test fit the gears into this half of the truck just to see how they would spin. As you saw, they were completely locked up when we first took them out, and they actually spin a lot better. Again, I still need to put some oil in here, and it's not absolutely perfect, but it is a huge improvement, and this should mean the model can actually move on its own. But now it's time to put that truck back together for good. And in case anyone's wondering, for all the gears and little joints and little bearings and whatnot, I'm just going to use some Lebel 107. And then on the worm gear, when we get to that in a little while, I'm going to be using some Lebel 106. So this truck is back together. Again, we can't do anything with the worm gear quite yet, as we're not ready to put it back in the chassis yet, but the truck itself actually rolls much, much smoother than it was before. That should be enough to get this model running properly. Now we've just got to do the exact same thing to the other truck. So as you can see here, I have put both trucks back together, and they're almost ready to go back into the model. But I've got a few other things to talk about really quick. Off camera, I did a few small things to the model as a whole. First of which, I replaced this one coupler cover. The old one had broken for whatever reason, and I have a bunch of spares, so I just kind of plopped a new one on. It took about 5 seconds. The other thing I did involves the motor mounts. I mentioned earlier on that they were worn out, and what I did is I used some canopy glue, which is a sort of weird glue. It's kind of flexible and dries clear, so I think it should be good for dampening the vibrations of the motor, which is really the whole point of these motor mounts, as well as to keep it in place. You can see some of the glue is drying, but it is firm enough to work with. I also used some of the exact same glue to fix the handrails to the shell of the model, as well as the horns. So those are still drying, and I figured I'd let those dry while we finish up working on the model. So really all that we have left to do, I'll go in the order of operations here. The first of which is dealing with the motor. I need to A, clean off the commutator, B, use a little bit of Labelle 107 just to add a little bit of lubricant to it. I know a lot of people aren't fond of putting lubricant on commutators, but it's just going to be a very small film, and I found on these Athearn units, so long as you can keep up with maintenance, they seem to hold up just fine, and it doesn't seem like any oil burns or dries out or gets stuck to the commutator, so long as you're on top of it. Then what we need to do is we need to attach the trucks back into the locomotive, put a little bit of Labelle oil on the bearings themselves and some grease on the worm gears, put the worm gear covers back on, and then once those are in place, we just need to replace the metal bar with this one little green wire I picked out. This isn't really a standard color or anything, it was just a wire I had laying around, and since it isn't really color coordinated to anything, I think it'll be fine, given the fact that this will be the only wire within the model. So at this point, everything with the chassis of the GP9 should be completely finished. I did redo this one solder connection because I wasn't happy with the one I filmed, so it looks a little bit nicer than it did before. And then here's how the shell turned out. All the handrails are much more firmly attached. I think they look a lot better. The horns also are a lot less likely to fall out. I find that to be a problem on some of these Bluebox models, and canopy glue seems to help that quite a bit. So I think really all we have left to do now is we gotta plop the shell back onto the locomotive and test it out. Hopefully all of our work paid off. I don't think there's any reason why it shouldn't run unless I did something wrong. We didn't really change anything other than that little bit of wiring up top and cleaning out the trucks. So unless something strange happened, I think this model should be good to go. Alright, now that the engine is finished, it's set up on the track, and let me give the thing some power. And that seems great. Can do a slow speed pretty well too. It's shockingly quiet given the motor mount issue. I think the canopy glue actually helped quite a bit. Let's see if it's the same situation in reverse. It may be a little loud while backing up, but I think that's pretty good for Bluebox standards. So I'm quite happy with how this GP9 turned out. Sure, it isn't completely original now, but I think the model looks really good, it cleaned up very well, and it runs shockingly well for a Bluebox unit. While it doesn't look the greatest or most realistic, even my Proto 2000 GP9 is probably better, especially given how wide the shell is, it's definitely going to be a good, useful unit. This may also be the first time I've ever encountered a seized Athearn Bluebox engine. It may have happened in the past, but I don't really recall any that were due to any dried lubricant. So it was an interesting experience, and I'm glad I got this thing working again.